Thank you all for joining today. I know you're normally used to Shayna up here, but since we just have 4 advisories that we're going to be discussing, it'll be me and Thomas Graham. Just as a reminder, I'm Matthew Cherry, the Marketing Practices Attorney for TABC, and Thomas is the Director of the Tax and Marketing Practices Division. So today we have 4 advisories that we're going to go over. The first 2 are amendments to current advisories, and the last 2 are 2 that we're going to repeal. And I'll start with the MPA 61, the retailer alcohol delivery and sales for off-premises consumption. So last session, the legislature made a couple changes to some of these authorities. So most of the advisory is the same as it was previously, but we added in new information on the types of beverages, certain retailers that are now included on the consumer delivery permit, and then also for a tamper-proof container. So the main changes will start on page 2. And it's the addition of private club registration permit to the type of retailer that a consumer delivery permit holder can deliver on behalf of. And then let's see, so the other really big new section is at the bottom of page 2 here, qualifying for a food and beverage certificate. So prior to last session, the only way to receive a food and beverage certificate, it was all based on the alcohol sales ratio compared to the total sales of the business. And last session, the legislature went in and added a new path to obtain the certificate, and that is under the new definition of a restaurant. And the focus of the restaurant definition is really going to just be on the actual physical operations of the business. And then if we go, there's nothing new on page 3. And then if we'll scroll down to page 4, this is some of the other new stuff, specifically the new definition for a tamper-proof container. It's one that has to be sealed by the permit holder and is clearly labeled with the permit holder's business name and the words alcoholic beverage. One important distinction is also for distilled spirits. They are going to have to be mixed with other beverages or garnishes and placed into that tamper-proof container. And if it is not in a tamper-proof container, then it would have to be in the original container that was sealed by the manufacturer. And for distilled spirits, there is a limit on the size of that, and it cannot be larger than a 375 milliliter container. If we go to the bottom of page 4, you'll see an explanation of the new definition for a tamper-proof container. And then there's 4 different examples of what that would qualify as. So it can be placed into a bag that has been sealed with a zip tie or staple, sealed with shrink wrap or a similar seal, sealed with a tamper-evident adhesive tape, or seal having 1 or more indicators or barriers to entry, which if breached or missing can reasonably be expected to provide visible evidence that tampering has occurred, or it can also be sealed mechanically on premises with a can sealer. And you can also find more information on the definition and for a tamper-proof container in our newly amended rule 41.16. And then let's see, if we go down to page 5, there's nothing new on these sections, and the rest of the advisory covers the liability protections that have been in statute for a few years now, and so there's nothing new with that either. So that kind of concludes just going over the changes that we've made to the advisory. And at this point in time, we'll accept any questions. So if you want to chime in or type something in the chat. No hands raised. Okay, we have one, I guess, comment from Justin Engel. It says the term agents needs to be defined as agents were removed from code in sunset. Okay, we will definitely take a look at that. And I do know in many instances, agent is still used in the code. So if you have anything more specific on that, Mr. Engel, where you feel there's an issue with that, please point that out and we'll take a look at it.
Matthew, Marcus Schwartz here.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing well, sir. This is more of a personal gripe maybe, but The title of it, retailer alcohol delivery, it's really a subset, I think, and it's more mixed beverage and private club with FB deliveries. And I just think it'd be cleaner to tighten that up, absent you making this into a tome and going through how all retailers can deliver.
Okay, I think that's a very good comment. Yeah, and you're correct. The focus of it really is for the MBs and private clubs with the FB, and then also the consumer delivery permit.
Hey, this is Justin Engel here, going on about the agent reference. The code itself stipulates agents as TABC officers, but any type of agent that is specified from a business was removed during sunset. And so you need to define what the agent is, whether it is a person employed by the retailer or if it is a third-party contact.
Okay, we'll take a look at that and see the best way that we can maybe add that in or add an additional.
And then one other thing under the qualifying for a food and beverage certificate on page 2, the 2 bullet points that are there are different enough that it might create confusion from guidelines that were posted by TABC in 2020. I guess that's July of 2020 and August of 21 in 2 presentations about the food and beverage certificates. You might just want to take a look back at those guidelines or those presentations that were posted to the public to make sure the wording's fine there. And then
you're talking about the 2 definitions for food service facility and for entree?
Yes, yeah. So right now, I think in August of 21, entree was deemed that the FB certificate holder had to have at least 8 different plates available. So it's just language that needs to be cleared up because I think there's just going to be confusion about that. The other thing with it is that it's marked that 60% or less of the business's total sales, whereas before TABC had used the term gross receipts instead of total sales, which the 2 terms would have difference. So that just needs to be clarified.
Okay, absolutely. I think I know exactly what you're talking about. When some of the initial notices went out regarding delivery and these types of requirements, that was before there was a change in the law or also a change in our rules. And so this is now the most recent and updated terms or language that gets used, as well as the definitions. Because the food service facility and entree, those are specific definitions that are found in, I believe it's Rule 33.5, and that was amended after some of those initial industry notices went out. So that would be why there is a discrepancy from some of the language currently in the advisory and those prior industry notices.
Marcus, did you have another question or comment?
No, sorry. I just unraised my hand. Apologies.
Not a problem. Okay, so no others. Okay, it sounds like that is all the questions or comments for advisory NPA 61. Next, we're going to move to advisory NPA 002, which is consumer tasting events at retail locations. And I'm going to let Thomas kind of explain and go over what we've added to this advisory.
Good morning. So this advisory, this is the 6th iteration of this 5th amendment. It's been around a long time. It started with just winery samplings and has expanded to try to cover most other samplings. It has to do with, really, it focuses on consumer sampling. So please keep in mind, it doesn't touch on upper tier members using section 10202 to sample at retail locations, 10204. So it doesn't bring into account the new legislation about distilleries sampling their products with retailers or wholesalers taking in samples. This is purely just a consumer sampling advisory. Some of the changes that were made, we've added group hubs in here. Last session, the law was changed to clarify that group hubs can do bar spins and can do tastings. So they have been added into this advisory along with some language in each, really under each permittee where a wholesaler could be involved. We added some clarity. Wholesalers under the law can't open, touch, or pour, nor can they purchase and pay for wine or spirits or any other products at off-premise tasting events. So if a wholesaler is working with an upper tier member or a manufacturer, let's say at a liquor store to do a sampling event, the wholesaler by law is prohibited from opening, touching, pouring the product and paying for that sampling event. It's something that needs to be paid for by the manufacturer and tier member. So we've had open, touch, and pour in here before, but we needed to add in the language about funding and underwriting and paying for. So you'll see that's new. What else, Matthew? Am I missing anything new in here? Other than that, I think just some clarity,
There's
right?
clarity, and I think one of the biggest distinctions is probably specifically for wineries. And that's one of the only permit holders that is actually allowed when they're doing the consumer tasting to remove product from their own inventory and bring it on to the retailer's premises for the consumers. And then let's see. Yeah. Most everything is very similar for each permit type. You'll see a bunch of the different restrictions that are listed, and they're almost all the same for every permit type. One of the main things we did with the advisory was just breaking that out up by each specific permit holder and then also the retailers. And like Thomas was saying, adding into adding in the brew pub permit. If anyone has any questions or comments or anything, raise your hand and we can answer.
Marcus Schwartz here again. And this and the previous rule, I think it's well done. And again, this comment is nitpicky, but just for general, I think understanding and consistency. I note in the distillers and rectifier section, you kind of go into bar spins, and then that's not listed anywhere else when they clearly aren't the only ones to do bar spins. I almost think either take out bar spin or do a separate section on bar spins. That's just my thoughts, though.
No, I think that's a great
Thank
comment.
you.
Perfect. Okay, so we also have another question from Jim Campbell. At an off-premise sampling, distributor cannot pay for sampling team. Can they share? It looks like can they share in product cost when bought from the retailer? Okay, no, in that case, they would not be able to. The only kind of, I guess, activity that they would be able to do at that off-premise consumer tasting event is answer questions.
Good morning, gentlemen. This is Amy Harrison.
Good morning.
Morning.
I like Marcus. I'm very appreciative. I think the guidance is great. A suggestion might be that where you use the words the permit holder, you might be a little more descriptive. When you take the first section, Texas distillers and rectifiers, that last sentence in that first paragraph talks about the retailer's premise. And then the first bullet is the permit holder. It's agent or employee. It's confusing or could be confusing about which permit holder, the retail permit holder or the Texas distiller and rectifier as the permit holder. So just clarity in those words might be helpful.
Thank you.
Yep, I agree. That's a good comment. We will definitely make that change.
Justin Engel.
Yeah, hi, this is Justin Engel. Just kind of going on with Amy's comments. I think the same sentiment of her comments could be made through with most of the with most of the holders in this. So like, for Texas distillers, it says the permit holder, its agents or employee may open, but for wineries, it just says winery employee. And then for non-resident sellers, it just stipulates they. So I think I think some looking through the first bullet points, there needs to be a lot more clarity on who is actually allowed and not allowed. Like, need to state more than just they for like non-resident sellers, because before that it's talking about consumers. So there just needs to be some pronoun clarity. And actually, I think it's most of the first bullet points under each of the sections.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense, and we will definitely go in and make that change to make it more clear and specific and on exactly which entity or which permit holder type we're actually talking about.
Okay, and then with that too, what about if the permit holders, like the distillers or the wineries or the breweries, hire contractors? Again, I guess they could be considered agents, but the manufacturing tier had the agents removed during sunset. And so it just needs, I think we need some clarity on if we are allowed to use a third-party firm to do these samplings instead of like instead of an employee of the business.
This is Thomas. If you take a look, let's see, page 5, promotional permits. The promotional permit holders are the guys that can legally contract with distillers, wineries, manufacturing tier members to go in and do that sampling. So if you see something in there too that stands out to you that'll help clarify that's who those parties are, please let me know. And we can add that in there as well.
Gentlemen, Amy Harrison again. In statutorily, as I recall, promotional permit holders had to give advance information to the commission as to the products that they would be promoting and the location. I know from my past experience that didn't consistently happen, and this does not reference that. Is that no longer required? Is there no notification on the part of a promotional permittee any longer?
Amy, that's something we can look at and make sure we clarify in here.
Yeah.
Obviously, I being on this side of the house, I don't want to have to give notice. So if it's no longer required, you know, you can omit it as you have, and if it isn't, I suggest it be put back in because it's not consistently followed.
I seem to remember you receiving a lot of faxes with
Did not ever, and you know, I wanted to keep up so I could go to all of them, but that didn't happen.
I'm pulling up the statute right now, Amy, and I can say that under the actual, what is this, chapter 50 for the promotional permit, that sort of notification to the agency is not a requirement.
Amy, I think it was probably in that original announcement that went out, you know, on the permittee, on the PR stuff where we had the application. It had some FAQs in there that talked about that. So it's good to know that's not statute, Matthew. We can clarify that.
Great.
Yeah, we can add a reference in advisory.
Great.
What else?
No other questions? Okay, I think that covers it unless anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question or have a comment on this advisory. One more? Okay.
One more. This is Justin Engel again. In the wine section, there are two different phrases being used for if the winery decides to purchase from the retailer. There's the retail value and fair market value. Both of those have two different connotations in the industry, and I think TABC needs to pick one or the other because one can be calculated differently then like fair market value could be calculated differently than the retail value.
Right, okay, no, that makes perfect sense. The intent is not to have a retailer alter its pricing in a way that would not be in the normal course of its business. So if they're gonna do the tasting, they don't need to go figure out, okay, well, what is everyone selling this product for in the market? And I now need to change my price just for this specific tasting or sampling. One thing that we definitely try to stay out of at the agency is dictating, anything to do with pricing at the retail level in regards to, what the amount that they actually sell their product for.
Yeah, that's understood. So I think if you go forward, I think the reference to fair market value needs to be removed and just have it as retail. Basically pick one or the other. But retail cost would be better than fair market.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. No, that's a very good comment.
And gentlemen, I just want to say thank you for including the Go Texan Partner Program. It's near and dear to me and it's often forgotten. And the fact that you put it in here just warms my heart. So thank you.
No problem. That covers it for this one. Okay, I think we are ready to move on to the last two. These are each actually just going to be a repeal of some very old advisories. So the first one, what was up on the, okay, here it is. So the first one was the cost of promotional items to retailers. This was issued back in 2005. And since then, we now have this information actually in a rule. And so the advisory is just no longer needed. And then the next one that we are going to be repealing is MPA 50. This comes, it was back in 2012. When this was issued, there was a discrepancy in the law between pre-arranging and pre-announcing a promotional activity in between distilled spirits versus what then was beer, now malt beverages. And since then, everything has changed in statute, and it's very clear under the code and in statute that for any type of alcoholic beverage, you can pre-announce and pre-arrange the promotional activity. And so that's why we're repealing this one as well. Okay. At this time, I guess I'll open the floor in case anyone has a question or comment about the repeal of either of these two. And if not, then I think that kind of concludes everything for today. Okay, well, thank you all very much for participating. And also, if as you're going through these, if you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to email them in, and we'll definitely take a look at those before we put out the formal and final advisory.